Lights, camera, action. The director of the hit pro-life movie Unplanned testifies before Congress. We're on Capitol Hill. In the footsteps of Christ, the Vatican is unveiling a relic of Christ's passion, seen for the first time in 300 years. We'll talk to the project leader. Asia Bibi, an update on the Catholic woman in Pakistan whose death sentence was reversed. And beware of pride. Pope Francis tells us the most dangerous attitude for Christians. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, April 10th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Senators take on social media giants today, questioning censorship of conservative thought. A filmmaker of the commercially successful pro-life movie Unplanned says Twitter is guilty of bias. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi breaks it down. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Unplanned has brought in close to $13 million since opening March 29th. It's the story of former Planned Parenthood clinic director Abby Johnson. She says she converted to the pro-life cause while seeing an ultrasound of an abortion. The film's opening, though, had some unplanned hiccups.
I saw it, and it was like it was twisting and fighting for its life.
The Christian film slapped with an R rating, and Unplanned's Twitter page looked like this for a few hours, suspended during the film's opening weekend. Today, I met the Catholic filmmakers.
What's the rationale for why you were blocked out?
We haven't really gotten anything officially. Unofficially, I think it's kind of oopsie.
Twitter apologized and put Unplanned back up, saying the account does not appear to be in violation of Twitter rules. Now, Texas Senator Ted Cruz wants answers.
Have they ever blocked Planned Parenthood? On the question of abortion, their political skew is dramatic. They silence one side of the debate and amplify another. There needs to be at least some basic transparency in terms of whose voices they're silencing.
Senator Cruz questions Facebook and Twitter execs. Are they stifling conservative speech?
The person who created the movie's account was previously suspended for breaking our rules. We reinstated at Unplanned Movie as soon as it was brought to our attention that the account was not being used for similar violative activity.
Twitter wasn't the only problem for Unplanned.
Google, because we had been blocked from advertising on most of the cable stations, Hallmark, Lifetime, Up TV, Cooking Channel, just a whole host of channels.
Because it was R-rated, right?
No, because it was...
they refused our ad dollars. We had the money.
Because it was pro-life and dealt with abortion. That's why we refused. So Google refused us because they said it dealt with abortion, and we're not marketing abortion, we're marketing a motion picture. They would not take any of our banner ads all the way through the date of our theatrical release, which was really crippling.
Unplanned's planners tell me they hope their work plays a part in God's plan.
Look, we fight the good fight, and we walk forward in faith, and we know, look, the Lord is going to get the message out. They tried to silence Jesus 2,000 years ago. How did that work out?
Twitter's representative tells the senators they've also blocked some abortion supporters. Now, Democrats said conservative perspectives do well on social media, and there's no bias against conservatives. Unplanned is now playing in a number of theaters across the country, but the filmmakers tell me the big streaming services aren't interested. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says China must stop persecuting its ethnic and religious minorities. And the comment was made as part of the secretary's testimony on Capitol Hill today in response to questions about human rights abuses. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee joins us from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. The Secretary of State says human rights violations around the world, including in China and North Korea, are an issue for this administration. Mike Pompeo spoke with senators about how the U.S. can put more pressure on regimes that persecute people of faith, while at the same time the administration is proposing cuts to the State Department's budget.
We have been incredibly candid about what's taking place inside of China, and not only to the Uyghurs, but to the Kazakhs and Christians. this is historic. The numbers are staggering.
This morning, Secretary Mike Pompeo told members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee hundreds of thousands of people in China have been or are being persecuted because they're an ethnic or religious minority.
The situation that Uyghurs face in Xinjiang, in China.
Senator Cory Gardner referred to the ethnic and Muslim minority group that lives in the western part of China. The communist government has put more than 100,000 into, quote, re-education camps. Advocates claim those camps are aimed at forcing Uyghurs to give up their cultural and religious ties in favor of loyalty to the government. I asked the senator what more the U.S. can do to pressure the Chinese to stop the persecution.
Well, I think there's global Magnitsky sanctions that should be considered. I think there's reciprocity when it comes to visa travel and denying those who are committing these atrocities visa access to the United States and others. So certainly a lot more pressure the United States could be bearing.
Senator Rob Portman highlighted North Korea, the #1 persecutor of Christians in the world. There, Christians practice underground and in houses. Owning a Bible can send you to jail.
I'll be in Korea next week. I'm going to be talking about the human rights abuses that continue in that country, the lack of religious freedom, the lack of freedom of the press, the lack of the ability for people to organize. I mean, it's a regime that, you know, continues to stand up for everything we don't support here in America, and we can't be naive about that.
Also, during today's hearing, Secretary Pompeo defended the administration's cuts to direct aid to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras amid a surge in migrants at the southern border. The secretary says U.S. aid to Central America so far, quote, has not been effective. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. Attorney General William Barr tells lawmakers he thinks the Obama administration spied on President Trump's 2016 campaign.
I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. I think spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur.
Barr also said he's reviewing the origins of the investigation into possible collusion between Russia and President Trump's 2016 campaign. President Trump congratulates Benjamin Netanyahu on his record-breaking re-election, marking his 5th term as Prime Minister of Israel. The president told reporters at the White House that the election results could even improve the chance of peace in the Middle East. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Today I questioned one of the president's top aides about the administration's Middle East peace plan. You'll hear Kellyanne Conway's responses in a moment. But first we hear from President Trump, who has said peace between Israelis and Palestinians would be the deal of the century.
Look, everyone said, and I never made it a promise, but everybody said you can't have peace in the Middle East with Israel and the Palestinians. I think we have a chance, and I think we have now a better chance with Bibi having won.
After leaving the White House this morning, President Trump used the phone on Air Force One to call Benjamin Netanyahu. The Israeli prime minister won re-election despite a tight race with Benny Gantz, Israel's former army chief of staff. The election raises questions about the chances of peace in the Middle East. I asked White House senior advisor Kellyanne Conway about the U.S. approach.
The president mentioned a Middle East peace deal this morning. He's shown a lot of support for Israel, but what has been given to Palestinians?
Oh, the president has discussed this many times. I'm not going to repeat what he has said about that. I think that the questions are asked in the context of Benjamin Netanyahu getting a historic 5th term. And a part of that must be that the voters appreciate the improved relations with the United States of America, recognizing the Golan Heights, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, moving our U.S. embassy to Israel, nuking the ridiculous Iran deal that was imperiling American interests and lives, but certainly those of the Israelis as well.
But again, what's been given to Palestinians?
You know what the president has talked about, and you see that Jason Greenblatt and Secretary Pompeo and Jared Kushner and others are working on all things Middle East.
Does the White House continue to support Israeli settlements expanding into the West Bank?
The president is very excited today that his ally, Benjamin Netanyahu, got elected, and that we respect the sovereignty of different countries and their leaders to make decisions on their behalf. We don't get involved in all of those.
Prime Minister Netanyahu said if he was elected, he would annex and recognize Israeli settlements developed in the Palestinian West Bank. A senior Palestinian official calls it a brazen violation of international law and says Israel will keep doing it as long as countries like the U.S. treat Israel with impunity. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan tells the BBC the Catholic woman whose death sentence was overturned will be leaving the country soon. He adds Asia Bibi is safe. She was convicted of blasphemy. Earlier this year, the country's Supreme Court reversed the ruling, leading to widespread protests and fears for her life. Holy See officials have opened a probe into a decades-old case of a missing girl. The 15-year-old disappeared in the summer of 1983. An anonymous tip says she was killed and secretly buried in a cemetery inside the Vatican. Starting tomorrow, for the first time in 300 years, pilgrims will be able to climb the marble steps of the Holy Stairs in Rome. Now, according to tradition, Jesus ascended these steps before he was sentenced to death by Pontius Pilate. The stairs were transported from Jerusalem to Rome in 326 AD. They used to be covered in wood, and the Vatican is restoring the relic and will unveil the stairs to the public tomorrow. Mary Angela Schroth is with the patron of the arts in the Vatican Museums. That's the group that sponsored the restoration. Welcome to our program, Mary Angela.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us where these stairs are, and couldn't people climb them before when they would come to Rome?
Well, the stairs are part of the Pontifical Sanctuary of the Holy Stairs, which is located next to St. John Lateran's in Rome. This is a project that was built by Pope Sixtus V in 1590. To lead up to the Sancta Sanctorum, the holiest of holies, the first papal chapel. There are 5 staircases, built, of course, because of the enormous number of pilgrims. But the center staircase is a marble series of steps, 28, that were brought from the Praetorium in Jerusalem by St. Helen in 326. These stairs have been covered over in wood from 1724 because they became consumed by the literally millions of pilgrims that have mounted them on their knees through the centuries. We uncovered the wood just in the beginning of March of this year, and what we found underneath was truly amazing.
Well, tell us about that. I mean, the first time in 300 years this wood has been taken off. You must have discovered quite a few things.
Well, there were thousands of small notes and photos and pieces of money and various icons that had been left under the wood. But most important were the stairs themselves, these stunning pieces of marble, beautiful cream color, beautiful gray cream color, which aligned perfectly with the frescoes. The entire sanctuary, of course, is decorated in fresco technique. But they had been worn away with deep troughs where the knees and the feet had been placed, and of course the wood was acting as a protective measure.
I would imagine that, you know, as we enter into Holy Week, this is going to be quite a sight for pilgrims and connect them directly with the Passion of our Lord.
The Holy Stairs has always been the destination for pilgrims in Rome during the week of the Passion. This year, of course, we have this unique historical discovery. It's a chance for the pilgrims to actually touch the same stairs that, according to history, Christ mounted to be judged by Pontius Pilate. So this is an added act of faith, and it's a testimony to the millions of faithful that have come here for Holy Week through the centuries, from the 3rd century on, to make this act not only of penance, but also as a personal act of faith for Rome and for the Church.
Mary Angela Schroth, coordinator for the Holy Stairs Project for the patrons of the arts in the Vatican Museums. Thank you so much for sharing this project with us.
Thank you.
Coming up, an update on the lawsuit filed by a student from a Catholic high school against the Washington Post. And Vice President Mike Pence addresses the UN, what he said about the upheaval in Venezuela. Vice President Pence says the U.S. is giving an additional $60 million in humanitarian aid to the people of Venezuela. Speaking at the UN, Pence called for the revoking of the credentials of the Venezuelan ambassador. And he says the U.S. is preparing another resolution recognizing the legitimacy of the government of interim President Juan Guaido.
So let us today rededicate ourselves to the mission upon which this body was founded. To maintain international peace, and security. And we have confidence that if we do that, if we make every effort to be at peace, that the God of peace will guide us and bless us.
Pence decried the involvement of Iran and Cuba in supporting the Maduro regime, and just yesterday, the Organization of American States voted to recognize Guaido as the country's leader. Joining us is Sabrina Farisi, our UN correspondent. She joins us from the UN in New York. Welcome, Sabrina.
Hello, Lauren.
Sabrina, in February, the UN voted on a resolution that called for the restoration of democracy in Venezuela and for the Maduro regime to allow all humanitarian aid to enter the country. It was shot down. So what's the likelihood of a new resolution happening?
If the Security Council were to vote today on this resolution, unfortunately, there would be zero chance it would pass. And this is because of Russia and China. Russia and China are still very close to the Maduro regime. In fact, after Pence spoke, Russia had some very strong words for Pence. He said, if you want to make your country great again, then stop interfering in other countries.
What else did he say about Iran and Cuba?
Well, Iran last week apparently sent a delegation to Caracas. This delegation was trying to set up an air service between Iran and Venezuela with an airline called Mahan Air. Now, this Iranian airline is on an international blacklist because it has ties to terrorism. So clearly, Pence was very upset about the fact that Iran is in Venezuela, but there's also other groups in Venezuela, Cuba, Russia, and China. Cuba has been sending military and intelligence personnel to train the Venezuelan secret police in bullying tactics and torture. And as of last week, we know there are 1,500 political prisoners in Venezuela.
What's happening now is the U.S. is saying they're going to provide more aid. But how can we be assured it's going to get to the people who need it?
That's a very good question. We don't really know. We do know that some of the U.S. aid is going to the refugees from Venezuela that are in Colombia and Brazil. Vice President Pence spoke about meeting a family from Venezuela that was in Manaus, Brazil. And the father was with his kids, and he said, you know, we had to leave the country because I just can't feed my children anymore. So he did mention that the aid is being used for these refugees from Venezuela. There is 200 metric tons of food at the border, and $60 million more dollars were going to be given to date. Were allocated today.
Sure.
But we don't know. We don't know how it's going to be going.
Tell me what the Holy See mission to the UN is saying about the Vice President's call to reject Maduro's leadership.
The Holy See mission to the UN hasn't spoken about the speech today. They wouldn't speak about it because it was a Security Council meeting. It was a closed debate. And their position would be the same as that of the Vatican. Cardinal Parolin, the Secretary of State of the Vatican, is talking about the importance of peace and humanitarian aid. Now, the part of the Catholic Church that is vocal are the local Venezuelan bishops who have been speaking in favor of Juan Guaido.
And
what the Vatican wants to do, the Vatican wants to be a bridge, no matter what the outcome is.
And that's what they were saying about the bishops, too. They were hoping that in Venezuela they could be a bridge, but they don't think that that is even an option anymore. Sabrina Farisi, reporting from the United Nations. Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you very much.
The Washington Post has asked a federal court to throw out a $250 million lawsuit filed by a student from a Catholic high school in Kentucky. Nicholas Sandman says the paper's coverage of a viral video encounter between him and a Native American was false and defamatory, and the Post says those stories were accurate and did not damage Sandman's reputation. Up next, Pope Francis on what he thinks is the most dangerous attitude. And a Catholic author tells us why she says an anti-Mary spirit is destroying our culture.
Lo sapete qual è? È l'orgoglio.
Pope Francis told the faithful that pride is the most dangerous attitude in Christian life. Speaking during the weekly gathering on a rainy day in St. Peter's Square, the Holy Father added that arrogance can also infect people who live an intense religious life. A Catholic author and mother of four says An anti-Marian spirit is destroying Western culture and has been for decades. Dr. Carrie Gress explores the topic in her new book, The Anti-Mary Exposed, Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. And Carrie Gress joins me now. Welcome back to our broadcast, Carrie.
Thank you. So great to be here.
Okay, that was a mouthful. Let's break that down. You've authored many books about Mary and her importance, but anti-Mary.
Right.
Where did that idea come from?
You know, it came when I was writing The Marian Option, and I really noticed that there was this huge gap between the ideal woman of our current culture and then who Our Lady is. They just don't match up.
And how so? Is that what you're calling toxic femininity?
Yeah, I think so. I think that what has actually happened, I mean, I've done 2 years of research on this now, and what's actually happened is that the vices that women have had have now been turned into virtues. A lot of rage, ambition, even just this lie that we live with that our children are an obstacle to our happiness, and careerism, all of these kinds of things. Which is not to say that women shouldn't be working, but clearly to say that when we buy into the lie that women have to be like men, or that our children are really an obstacle to our happiness, and that's what I'm calling toxic femininity.
Obstacle
and really
to our
is
happiness.
the
I have
problem.
3 children. I can't even wrap my head around those words. But okay, in this book you write, and I'm going to show this to our viewers here. Through the pill, followed by the advent of legalized abortion, motherhood has been on the chopping block along with childhood, and motherhood has become dispensable. Is this treatment of motherhood erasing the spirit of Mary? Is that where you're going with this?
Well, I think it's a bigger issue. And we have to obviously look back to the early feminists in the 1960s and what it was that what they were trying to do. And a lot of my research unearthed details related to the occult and to Marxism. So there's basically what they wanted to destroy was the patriarchy. And how do you do that? By destroying the family, by promoting all kinds of things that obviously are helpful and important to women. So what we've seen is really this pattern of women trying to be like men, and in order to do that, they can't have children. And this is why we're seeing these abortion numbers, 60 million abortions. I mean, if we look at any other age in history, the fact that we have women killing their own children is just historically unprecedented.
You point out that equality between men and women developed in Catholicism.
Yes.
Define what you mean by that.
Well, I think if you look back at any world religion, you never see women as equal to men. I mean, Aristotle spoke of women as deformed males, and throughout religions.
Which isn't very kind.
It's not.
Okay, good.
But
we agree on
I'm
that.
not trying to defend Aristotle in any way,
Okay.
shape, or form. But what's happened is obviously with Christ coming, he treated women differently. And then throughout the 2,000 years of Catholic history, we've seen Our Lady really flourish in a devotion to her. And through that understanding of who she was, we understand a feminine, a maternal, a different way to be engaged with God and to reflect God. And the church is called a she for that reason, because of that maternal reflection. And that's really what has given women equality. And it's just ironic to me that we've lost sight of that. And now, of course, there's so much rage against the church because people think it's so it hates women and is against women, and in fact it's just exactly the opposite. This is what's really where we've undergirded our dignity.
We have to go, but I really did enjoy the piece where it says, be a daughter to the mother, and that Mary stands for her daughters, but her daughters also must stand for her. Thank you so much. Carrie Gress, author of The Anti-Mary Exposed, Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. That does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll leave you tonight with more from the Holy Stairs in Rome as restoration finishes. Good night, and God bless you.